My name is Audrey Mercer, and I was 41 years old the night my daughter called me from the service hallway of Oak Ridge Country Club and asked if she still counted as family. I was sitting beside Mr. Donnelly in room 214 at Willow Bend Hospice, holding one of his hands while his breathing came in long, uneven spaces. His daughter was flying in from Denver and had already missed 2 connections, so I had promised him he would not be alone. That was my job. That was also, more often than people understood, my curse. I knew how to stay calm in rooms where everything was breaking. My phone buzzed against my thigh at 8:17 p.m. Clara's name lit up the screen. I almost let it go to voicemail, because Clara knew not to call during an end-of-life watch unless something was wrong. I answered quietly. For a second, all I heard was music, laughter, glasses clinking. Then my daughter's breath, small and shaky. "Mom," she whispered. "Grandma said there wasn't room for me at the Mercer table." I stood so fast my chair scraped the floor. Clara kept talking before I could ask where she was. She said Aunt Monica had given her a sticker that read Clara Event Help. She said she had been passing out name tags for almost 2 hours. She said the photographer had called for the legacy portrait, and when she stepped forward, Monica put a hand on her shoulder and smiled like she was being kind. "Not this one, sweetie," Monica had said. "This is the Mercer family shot." Then Clara went quiet. Behind her, through the phone, I heard applause swell from the ballroom, probably for my father's speech about honor, tradition, and the name we carry. And then my daughter asked, so softly I almost missed it, "Mom, do I still count as family if Dad is gone?" Please subscribe to support the channel. I bet your phone battery is at 21% right now, right? If that's true, type 1. If not, type 2. Let's see whether I got it right. Alright, enough talking. Let's begin the story. For a few seconds, I could not answer her. Not because I doubted the answer. Clara counted. Clara had always counted. What hollowed me out was realizing that I had sent my daughter into a room where adults had made her feel as if belonging was something she had to earn by being useful. I looked back at Mr. Donnelly. His eyes were closed, one hand resting on the blanket where I had left it. The night nurse, Maribel, stood in the doorway with a medication cup, and the moment she saw my face, she stepped inside without asking. "Clara," I said, keeping my voice low, "tell me exactly where you are." "The hallway behind the ballroom," she whispered, "near the kitchen doors." I didn't want to go back in. "Good. Stay where the lights are. Don't go outside. Don't go back into that room. Keep me on the phone." She said okay, but her voice had that careful sound children use when they are trying not to make their pain inconvenient. With my free hand, I opened my contacts and called June Abbott. June had lived near my parents for more than 30 years, long enough to know every polished version of the Mercer family and every crack underneath it. She was 76, widowed, and had stopped attending my mother's church luncheons after telling Beverly that hospitality did not count if it only applied to people worth impressing. She answered on the third ring. "Audrey?" "June, I need help. Clara is at Oak Ridge Country Club, in the service hallway behind the ballroom." I heard a chair scrape. "What happened?" "My family happened." That was enough. "I'm putting on shoes," she said. "Keep her on the line." I stayed with Clara while June drove. I asked her to describe what she could see, not because I needed the details, but because I needed her breathing to slow. Beige walls. Exit sign. 2 stacked banquet chairs. A cart of empty water pitchers. Somewhere beyond the doors, a microphone squealed, and a man laughed like nothing in the world had gone wrong. 12 minutes later, Clara said, "Mrs. Abbott is here." Then June's voice came through, warm and steady. "Oh, sweetheart, give me that bag." "I can carry it," Clara said. "No," June answered. "You've carried enough tonight." At 8:34 p.m., June texted me. "She's with me. Coat on. Heat running. She keeps apologizing. That worries me." I read those words once, then again. Then I slipped the phone into my pocket, went back to Mr. Donnelly's bedside, and held his hand while my other hand closed around the truth my family had just handed me. The truth had started long before Clara was old enough to understand it. It started the first time I brought Caleb Rowan home to meet my parents, 2 years before Clara was born. He was 26 then, broad-shouldered from the firehouse, with a sunburn across his nose and a clean shirt he had ironed twice because he wanted to make a good impression. He carried flowers for my mother, and a bottle of wine he could barely afford for my father. He stood on the Mercer front porch like a man walking into a room where the rules had been written before he was born. Beverly opened the door, looked at the flowers, and smiled with only the lower half of her face. "How thoughtful," she said. "Franklin, Audrey's friend is here. Not boyfriend. Not Caleb. Friend." My father shook his hand in the foyer beneath the framed photograph of him receiving an award from the County Bar Association. Franklin Mercer had spent 30 years on a bench, deciding which people sounded credible, which people belonged in certain rooms, which people deserved second chances. That night, he looked at Caleb's work-rough hands and made his decision before the salad plates came out. "So," he said over dinner, cutting into the roast chicken Beverly only made when company needed to be impressed. "Firefighting. Is that the long-term plan?" Caleb did not flinch. "Yes, sir, it is." My mother set down the water pitcher. "That must be very physically demanding." She said it the way other women said unfortunate. Caleb smiled anyway. He told them about the station, about the captain who taught him how to read smoke, about visiting elementary schools where children asked if fire trucks had beds in them. He did not know yet that the more sincerely he spoke, the more my parents heard lack of ambition. When we left that night, he squeezed my hand in the truck and said, "They love you, they're just careful." I looked out the window so he would not see my face. "They're not careful," I said. "They're measuring." He married me anyway. For years, they never insulted him in a way I could hold up in daylight. They called him hardworking, practical, good with tools. They said not everyone needed college, as if they were awarding him a ribbon for knowing his place. At church dinners, Beverly introduced him as Audrey's husband, the firefighter, with that tiny pause before the last word. Then, Caleb died. After the apartment fire, on Marlowe Street. Clara was 6. At the funeral reception, she fell asleep on my lap, wearing his department sweatshirt, the sleeves hanging past her hands. In the kitchen, I heard my mother tell Aunt Rosalie, "Maybe now Audrey can rebuild properly." That was the first time I understood they had never been waiting to accept him. They had been waiting for him to disappear. After Caleb's funeral, I made the kind of bargain exhausted women make when they are too tired to call it surrender. I told myself Clara needed grandparents. I told myself my parents were grieving in their own stiff, Mercer way. I told myself that if I kept showing up, if I kept placing my daughter gently in front of them, eventually they would look at her and see more than the man they had never wanted me to marry. So I brought her to Sunday lunches. I brought her to birthdays. I brought her to Easter egg hunts in my parents' clipped backyard, where Beverly hid pastel plastic eggs beneath trimmed boxwoods and acted as if every child had been given the same chance to find them. I smiled through all of it. I cut ham. I packed leftovers. I corrected people quietly when they called her Audrey's girl. "She has a name," I would say. They would blink, as if I had made the room uncomfortable. Clara learned early how to make herself small in that house. She sat on the edge of chairs instead of leaning back. She asked, before taking lemonade from the refrigerator, even though the other children opened it with both hands and let the cold air spill out. She said thank you for gifts that had clearly been bought on the way over, while Monica's children opened scooters, tablets, camp envelopes, things with receipts folded neatly inside. Franklin mailed Clara birthday cards every year, always on time, always signed in blue ink. He never forgot the date. He only forgot the child. The messages sounded like something written to a client's granddaughter. "Hope school is going well. Keep working hard. Proud of your progress." He never came to her winter art show, even the year her charcoal drawing won first place and hung in the public library lobby for 6 weeks. Beverly was worse, because she remembered details and used them incorrectly. She knew Clara liked drawing, so she bought her coloring books meant for 8-year-olds when Clara was 13. She knew Clara hated coconut and served coconut cake on her birthday, then looked wounded when Clara only ate the icing. She called it sensitivity. I called it rehearsal. And Monica never once introduced Clara as her niece. Not at church picnics. Not at baby showers. Not under the white 4th of July tent in my parents' yard. Clara was Audrey's daughter. Caleb's kid. The artsy one. Or, when Monica wanted to sound generous, our little helper. For 9 years, I kept thinking a door left cracked open was better than no door at all. I was wrong. They had not left it open for Clara. They had left it open so she could carry things through it. The invitation to the reunion came 3 weeks before the event, wrapped in the kind of warmth my mother only used when she wanted something to look effortless. She called on a Tuesday afternoon, while I was parked outside a patient's apartment complex, eating a granola bar over my lap because I had 17 minutes between visits. Beverly did not usually call me during the day. She preferred texts, short ones, the kind that made affection sound like a reminder from a dentist's office. But that afternoon, her voice came through soft and bright. "Audrey, we're doing something special this year," she said. 50 years of Mercer family gatherings. Your father is giving a toast. There will be a photographer, a memory table, some people from the Historical Society. It would mean a lot if you came. I waited. There was always another sentence with my mother. The first one was the ribbon. The second one was the hook. And Clara should be there, of course. I looked through my windshield at the brick apartment building in front of me. A woman on the second floor was watering a geranium in a coffee mug. I remember that because I stared at it too long, trying not to let one ordinary sentence from my mother undo 9 years of evidence. Clara should be there. Not Clara can come. Not bring her if you want. Should, I asked. You want Clara at the reunion? Don't sound so surprised, Beverly said, lightly enough to bruise. She's 15 now, old enough to appreciate where she comes from. Where she comes from, not who she is. That evening, I told Clara at the kitchen counter. I tried to make my voice neutral, but hope is hard to hide from a child who has spent her life rationing it. She looked up from a sketch of Queen Anne's lace and said, "Do you think Grandpa will put Dad's picture on the memory table?" I should have said I did not know. I should have protected the soft place in her voice. Instead, I said, maybe. For the next 2 weeks, Clara treated that maybe like a small living thing. She chose a pale blue dress from a thrift store in Clintonville, the kind with tiny covered buttons at the sleeves. She printed 3 pictures of Caleb, one in his firehouse turnout coat, one holding her as a baby, one sitting on our old porch with a paper plate balanced on his knee. She arranged them in a little album with black photo corners. I would not see the full email thread until after the damage was done. Franklin had forwarded me the parking instructions by mistake, and beneath them sat Monica's note to the planning committee. Clara can help with registration, since she won't be in the main lineage portrait. By then, Clara had already written her name inside the album. By then, I had already let her believe they had finally saved her a seat. The night of the reunion, Oak Ridge Country Club looked exactly the way my parents wanted their lives to look from the outside. Polished, expensive, and arranged so carefully that no one would notice what had been removed. The ballroom had cream tablecloths, white hydrangeas, gold-rimmed plates, and framed black and white photographs of Mercers going back 3 generations. There was a welcome table near the entrance with printed name cards in neat alphabetical rows. Behind the podium, a banner read, "Mercer Family. 50 years of faith, service, and honor." My father had chosen those words himself. I knew that because Franklin Mercer had never trusted anyone else to define him. I could not go with Clara that evening. One of my hospice patients had declined faster than expected, and I had already promised his niece I would stay until the night nurse arrived. Beverly knew that. She had said, "Don't worry, Audrey. Clara is old enough. We'll take good care of her." I learned later from the lobby camera timestamp that Clara arrived at 5:24 p.m. She walked in wearing the pale blue dress from Clintonville, her hair pinned back with 2 pearl clips she had borrowed from me, and the little album of Caleb's photographs held against her ribs like an offering. Beverly met her near the welcome table, not with a hug. Not even with the air kiss she saved for women from church. She touched Clara's shoulder with 2 fingers and said, "Oh good, you're here. We're a little short on help." Clara looked at the printed name cards. There was no card for her. Beverly picked up a blank sticker, wrote Clara Event Help in black marker, and pressed it lightly to the front of my daughter's dress. "I thought I was sitting with you," Clara said. "You'll be moving around, sweetheart," Beverly answered. "That's better than being stuck at a table with adults." So Clara stood at registration. She handed out programs. She pointed elderly cousins toward the restrooms. She carried 2 pitchers of lemonade to the children's table and smiled when someone asked if she worked for the club. At 6:40, the photographer called for the main family portrait. Clara stepped forward with the album still in her hands. Monica reached her first. She smiled wide, the way realtors smile when they are closing a house with bad plumbing, and placed one hand on Clara's shoulder. "Not this one, sweetie," she said. "This is the Mercer legacy shot." Across the room, Franklin adjusted his cufflinks. He saw my daughter step back. He let the camera flash anyway. I did not see that camera flash when it happened. I saw it later, after Clara was asleep on June Abbott's couch, and after Mr. Donnelly's niece finally arrived from Denver with mascara under her eyes, and a suitcase still tagged from the airport. I drove home just after midnight, with my hospice badge still clipped to my sweater, and the kind of quiet inside me that does not mean peace. It means the body has stopped wasting energy on shock. June had sent Clara home with me wrapped in one of her old cardigans. My daughter did not cry in the car. She leaned her head against the window and watched the streetlights pass over her face. When we got upstairs, she put Caleb's little album on the kitchen table, still unopened by anyone but her. Then she went to her room and shut the door softly, as if she were still trying not to disturb people who had already hurt her. I made coffee I never drank. Then I opened my laptop. The first thing I found was the live stream. One of my cousins had posted it publicly, because the Mercers never missed a chance to turn togetherness into proof. The video shook a little when people clapped for my father. At the podium, Franklin spoke about faith, service, and the sacred duty of remembering where we came from. Behind him, Clara crossed the edge of the frame carrying a stack of programs against her chest. I rewound it twice. At 6:43, Monica stepped near the microphone without realizing it was still live. Her voice came through under the music, clear enough that I could hear the smile in it. "She's not part of the Mercer line people came to see." No one corrected her. Someone laughed softly. The kind of laugh people give when they are relieved the cruelty was said by someone else. Then, I opened the photographer's preview gallery. There were 12 images from the legacy portrait. In every one, Clara was missing. In the 13th image, a test shot taken before Monica moved her, my daughter stood at the far left with Caleb's album in her hands, half in shadow, half in the family. I saved it. After that came the hallway footage from Oak Ridge, forwarded by June through a manager she knew from church. There was Beverly handing Clara a typed list. Registration, water pitchers, trash check, coat table. There was the sticker on Clara's dress. There was my daughter reading the list, without lifting her head. By 1:06 a.m., I had 7 files on my desktop. By 1:11, I had stopped shaking. And by 1:18, I knew exactly whose signature I needed to put beside them. That signature had been sitting in my filing cabinet for 14 months. I found it the previous April, after my father slipped on the back patio and fractured his wrist badly enough to spend one night at Riverside Methodist. Beverly called me from the hospital gift shop, not because she needed comfort, but because she needed paperwork. Franklin's supplemental insurance card was in his office, she said, bottom drawer, gray folder, behind the property tax files. She gave instructions like she was directing staff. I let myself into their house with the key I still had for emergencies. The office smelled the way it always had: lemon oil, old paper, and the faint leather of the chair my father had used since 1986. His diplomas hung on the wall. His judicial portrait faced the desk. Even empty, the room felt like it expected you to stand up straight. The gray folder was where Beverly said it would be. But when I pulled it out, another envelope slid loose from behind it and landed flat against my shoe. It was cream-colored, thick, the kind of stationery Caleb used only when something mattered. Across the front, in his handwriting, were 9 words. Franklin, if I don't get the chance to say this again. C.R. For a few seconds I did not move. I knew that slant in the C. I knew the pressure of his pen at the end of a sentence. Caleb had written grocery lists like he was leaving instructions for a rescue crew. Clear. Careful. No wasted line. I opened the envelope standing beside my father's desk. The letter was dated 8 months before the fire on Marlowe Street. Caleb had written that he knew my parents did not approve of him. He said he was not asking Franklin to change his opinion. He was not asking to be welcomed, praised, or forgiven for loving me in a way the Mercers considered inconvenient. He was asking one thing. If anything ever happened to him, Clara was not to be treated like evidence of a mistake. She was to be spoken to by name. She was to have a chair. She was to know that the people who shared her mother's blood did not consider her temporary. At the bottom, beneath Caleb's signature, my father had written his own name and the date. Not initials, not a note. A full signature, deliberate and legal-looking, the kind he used when he wanted the world to know he understood what he was agreeing to. I made 3 copies before I put it back. I did not use it then. Some promises are not weapons when you find them. They become weapons when the person who made them breaks them in front of a child. At 1:22 a.m., I called Camille Price. Camille was not the kind of attorney people hired when they wanted drama. She did estate planning, guardianship paperwork, medical directives, the quiet documents families only appreciate after somebody has already failed them. I had first met her 2 years earlier when I updated my will and removed Beverly as my emergency medical decision-maker. Camille had read the change, looked at me over her glasses, and said, "That sentence usually has a story behind it." I had not told her then. I told her now. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice rough with sleep but already focused. "Audrey, I need to protect Clara from my parents." There was one small pause. Then paper shifted. "Tell me in order," she said. "Not how you feel yet. What happened first?" So I told her. Clara's call from the service hallway. June picking her up. The sticker. The photographer. Monica's sentence on the live stream. Beverly's typed task list. The email thread. The test shot where my daughter stood half in and half out of the family frame. Then I told her about Caleb's letter and Franklin's signature. Camille did not interrupt. I could hear her pen moving. When I finished, she said, "Do you want revenge, or do you want a boundary that survives Monday morning?" That question steadied me more than sympathy would have. "A boundary," I said. "Good. Then we do this cleanly." She explained that cruelty at a family reunion was not something a court would fix for me. There was no judge waiting to punish Beverly for a sticker, or Monica for a sentence whispered near a microphone, but there were legal doors I could close. I could remove Franklin and Beverly from Clara's school emergency contacts. I could revoke their authorization at her pediatrician's office. I could update my own healthcare proxy and HIPAA release, so neither of my parents could step into a hospital room and speak for me if I were unconscious. I could notify Mr. Everett Shaw, Clara's principal, in writing that no Mercer family member except me had permission to remove Clara from campus or request records. Then Camille asked about money. I told her about the education fund Franklin had opened in 2017, after Caleb died, the one he mentioned once in an email and never spoke of again. Last I knew, it held about $36,400. If he meant it for Clara, Camille said, ask him to put it where his guilt can't change its mind. By 1:49 a.m., I had a legal pad open beside my laptop. By 2:03, Camille had emailed me the language for a no-contact notice. By 2:17, I understood what she meant when she said my father had built his life on honor. I did not need to accuse him. I needed to document him. At 2:21 a.m., I stopped trying to write like a daughter. That was the first decision. If I wrote to Franklin and Beverly as their child, the letter would come out begging in places I did not want it to beg. It would ask why. It would explain too much. It would leave little doors open for them to walk through with words like misunderstanding, oversensitive, family tradition, and Monica didn't mean it that way, so I wrote it like an incident report. On Saturday, the 21st of June 2025, at approximately 5:24 p.m., my 15-year-old daughter, Clara Mercer, arrived at Oak Ridge Country Club for the Mercer family reunion at your invitation. Upon arrival, she was not provided a printed name card, table assignment, or seat with invited family members. Instead, she was labeled Event Help and assigned service tasks. The first paragraph took the longest because my hands wanted to turn facts into grief. I did not let them. I listed the sticker, the registration table, the typed task sheet, the pictures, the coat table, the portrait, Monica's sentence from the live stream, Franklin's silence. Then I attached the receipts. I printed the still image of Clara standing half inside the family portrait, with Caleb's album pressed to her ribs. I printed the screenshot of Monica's email about the lineage portrait. I printed the transcript of the live stream audio. I printed the hallway still of Beverly handing Clara the task list. I printed Clara's 8:17 p.m. text asking me to call. I printed Caleb's letter, with Franklin's full signature enlarged at the bottom. Last, I printed Camille's notice. 120 days of no contact, removal from school and medical access, and a written request that the education fund be transferred into an account Clara could not be punished out of later. At 3:36, I signed the letter. I did not sign it. Love. Audrey. I did not sign it. Your daughter. I sign my full name the way I sign hospice documents when a family needs clarity more than comfort. Audrey Rowan Mercer. Then I wrote the final line by hand. I am not asking you to repair your image. I am removing my daughter from the room where you built it. Clara was asleep in her room when I left. Her door was open 3 inches, the way it had been since she was little. I stood there for a moment, listening to her breathe, and remembered the sticker on her dress. At 4:02 a.m., I drove across Columbus with the envelope on the passenger seat. The streets were empty. My coffee had gone cold. I parked 2 houses down from my parents' place, walked up the brick path, and taped the envelope flat against their front door. 4 strips, 1 on each side. At 4:38 a.m., the letter was where their guests would have seen a wreath. I did not knock. I had spent too many years knocking. By the time Beverly opened the front door, I was back in my kitchen with my laptop open and my coat still on. The doorbell camera sent the notification at 6:57 a.m. She stepped onto the porch in her robe, holding a coffee mug in one hand, and stopped as if the envelope had spoken first. She looked at the tape, then at my handwriting, then, finally, at the camera. For once, my mother knew she was being watched and had no table setting to hide behind. She carried the envelope inside. I watched through the security app they had insisted all family members download after a package theft 2 summers earlier. Beverly opened it at the foyer console, with a silver letter opener shaped like a magnolia leaf. She read the first page standing up. Her mouth tightened, not with shame, but calculation. When she reached the list of attachments, she turned toward the stairs. "Franklin," she called. Her voice was careful. "You need to come down." My father appeared in a navy robe, hair still flattened on one side from sleep. He took the letter from her without asking what it was. Franklin Mercer had read warrants, settlements, custody orders, foreclosure notices. Paper had always obeyed him. That morning, it did not. He read the first paragraph like a judge. No expression. No wasted movement. Then he turned to the page with Caleb's letter. I watched his hand change before his face did. His thumb moved first, then his wrist. The paper dipped once, rose, dipped again. Beverly reached toward him. "Franklin, let me..." "No." It was not loud. That made it worse. He sat down on the bottom stair, and stared at his own signature enlarged beneath Caleb's words. For almost a full minute, he did not move. Then he said, so quietly the kitchen camera barely caught it. He asked me to make room for her. Beverly's answer came too fast. Who else has seen this? Not how is Clara? Not what did we do? Who else? At 8:12, Monica arrived with Pierce, carrying a white bakery box, and the brittle cheer of a woman determined to outrun consequences. She saw Beverly's face and stopped. Pierce picked up the packet from the console before Monica could. He read standing, then sitting. Then he opened his phone, found the Livestream link, and played Monica's own voice back into the foyer. She's not part of the Mercer line people came to see, Monica whispered. Pierce, that's out of context. He looked at her as if he had finally found the context. No, he said. That is the context. At 8:46, Rosalie texted me. I saw enough last night. I stayed quiet once. I will not stay quiet twice. The 120 days were quieter than I expected. Not peaceful at first. Quiet. There is a difference. Peace feels like rest. Quiet, in the beginning, felt like the house holding its breath, waiting for an old pattern to knock and find out the locks had changed. Franklin did not call. Beverly did not call. Monica sent one text through a cousin about misunderstandings being weaponized, and Camille handled it before I had to read the second sentence. Pierce moved into an extended stay hotel for 6 weeks. Rosalie came by once with a peach pie and stood in my kitchen for 10 minutes before she said, I should have crossed that ballroom. I told her the truth. Yes, you should have. She nodded. She did not ask me to make that easier for her. In September, the education fund was transferred. $36,400, plus a little interest Franklin had never mentioned, moved into an account under Clara's name with me as custodian. He did not come to the bank. His attorney sent the paperwork with a note clipped to the front. Clara signed her name slowly, the way children do when adults suddenly admit their future has paperwork attached to it. On the drive home, she asked, was that money supposed to make him feel better? I kept both hands on the wheel. I think it was supposed to make him feel like he had done something. She looked out the window. That's not the same thing. No, I said. It isn't. 2 weeks after the no-contact period ended, a letter arrived for Clara in Franklin's handwriting. I placed it on the kitchen table and did not touch it again. She walked past it for 3 days. On the 4th, she took it to her room. That night, she came back holding the envelope open. He wrote, I should have made room before they made you useful. I waited. That's all I read, she said. That's enough for today, I told her. By late October, I set our table for 5. Clara, me, June Abbott, Rosalie, and Maribel from hospice, who had covered for me more times than policy allowed. No banner, no photographer, no speech about legacy. Clara put Caleb's little album in the center of the table beside a bowl of apples and a candle that smelled like cedar. Nobody moved it. Before dinner, June looked at Clara and said, Where would you like me to sit, honey? Clara smiled for the first time in a way that reached both eyes. Anywhere, she said. There's room. That was when I understood the rule I should have learned years earlier. Family is not the people who save you a seat when the camera is on. Family is the people who notice when you are standing. The hardest lesson in this story is that love is not proven by blood, last names, old photographs, or a place at a table that can be taken away the moment you stop being useful. Love is proven by what people do when no one is applauding. It is proven in hallways, in quiet kitchens, in the small moments when someone notices a child standing alone and decides that silence is not good enough. Audrey spent years believing that a cracked open door was better than no door at all. Many people do that. We keep returning to families that wound us because we hope time will soften them. We tell ourselves they did not mean it, that they were tired, that they were raised differently, that maybe next holiday, next birthday, next reunion, they will finally see us clearly. But sometimes the door is not open because we are welcome. Sometimes it is open because people expect us to keep carrying what they refuse to carry themselves. The real victory was not the letter on the door. It was not the proof, the signature, the money, or the shame that followed. The real victory was Audrey teaching Clara that belonging is not something a child should have to earn. A child should not have to serve, shrink, smile, or stay quiet to be loved. And maybe that is the lesson for all of us. Family should be a place where your name is spoken with care, where your seat is not conditional, where your pain is not treated as an inconvenience. When people cannot offer that, walking away is not cruelty. It is clarity. Healing does not always look like forgiveness. Sometimes it looks like a smaller table, a safer room, a new tradition, a mother saying, "Not my child, not again." So tonight, ask yourself, who notices when you are standing? Who makes room before you have to ask? And who only calls you family when it makes them look good? Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to rebuild the meaning of family for yourself? If this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and stay with us for more stories about truth, resilience, and the courage to choose peace.